And with us in the studio this week, my good friend, former mayor of Bal Harbour in Miami, political consultant, and the host of his own show, which I have had the privilege of being interviewed on, Standpoint. Gabe Groisman, welcome back to Israel.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course. Gabe, you know, we interview people all the time about so many Jewish things and Israel-focused things. But honestly, I think you're the best person to be able to help us decode what is going on in America right now with Trump's economic policy, with the tariffs hikes that he's put. So that's what I'd love to talk about, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Because I know that you're a government consultant as well as a consultant for private companies, and I think you really understand this subject very well.
I'm definitely not an economist, but I do understand the politics behind it, the strategy, what he's trying to accomplish.
Great, because we honestly need an education here. So Trump surprised the world, or maybe he didn't surprise the world, when I think a week ago he comes out with a huge chart and decides to impose tariffs on most countries, when many of the countries around the world, there were no tariffs on America importing goods. Is that the baseline here?
I'll push back a little bit.
Please.
Yes, there were tariffs, and there are tariffs that are imposed on American goods and American products all over the world.
Okay.
And it's really not a surprise in the sense that Trump has been saying exactly this since the 1990s.
What has he been saying?
He's been saying that the U.S., there's a trade deficit, that countries are taking advantage of the United States, and the only way to bring back manufacturing to our country, to bring back those glory days, is to actually pushing back against sort of the free trade regimes, which aren't really free trade because it doesn't get rid of tariffs on both sides. The U.S. companies, the way Trump looks at it,
yeah,
and he's right about this,
yeah.
U.S. goods and U.S. companies, there's tariffs imposed on them from people all over the world.
Right.
And the inverse isn't the case, which is fine because, the other side is because the U.S. consumes more than anybody else in the world.
Yes.
So that's a good thing, but it's at the expense of the American workers. It's one of the reasons why, one of the reasons why you've seen over the last few decades so many cities actually totally shut down, cities that are relying upon manufacturing and factories just shutting down, taking it all over the world. And then during COVID, it all really exploded because when this sort of globalization of the economy, while it's good when everything is good,
yeah,
but it assumes a few things. It assumes that all actors are good actors,
mm-hmm.
which is not the case. And we could talk about China and their plan to dominate the world,
yeah,
which they're very actually explicit about.
Yeah.
But also when things happen like the COVID pandemic and you can't get goods into the United States,
yeah,
it really is impacting our society. So it's kind of a moment. Trump was going to do it during this whole thing during his first administration, 45. Maybe he didn't have the political will to do it because you're seeing the pushback from everybody. And maybe now because he only has one term in office, he's going all in to try to implement this policy to correct what he's seen as wrongs that have been imposed for many years.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that American goods always, or for the most part, had tariffs imposed on them when they exported goods to the world.
Correct.
And importing, there was some tariffs, but for the most part, America was a free-for-all, which means that jobs were being exported somewhere else because it was cheaper to employ people at the cost of the American manufacturer worker. Exactly. And so he's trying to redress the balance on that.
Exactly.
So why are the markets reacting in such a negative way?
So look, my understanding of the markets is that instability is not a friend to the market. So yeah. People don't understand. First of all, this came very quickly, right? Everyone saw that there weren't even details put out until the big announcement. So everyone knew there were tariffs coming. Nobody knew what the tariffs were going to be. So companies were spinning, trying to figure out what are the tariffs going to be? How are we going to adjust? We still have to manufacture. The numbers have to work, right? If the numbers don't pencil in a business, you're going to shut down the business. You're going to stop manufacturing there. You have to retool, open in different places. You might stop shipping. So all those companies were sort of in this, and still are, in this instability where they're not sure where the political landscape is going, what the actual tariffs are going to be at the end of the day. That's another part of it. So the markets react in that sense. They definitely went down. They went up yesterday, came back down to, today in Israel, now we're a day ahead. So today will probably be another bad day.
Right.
The markets don't like political instability, and that's what we have now. And even so, if you think about it, Trump's strategy on this is You come in hard. It's a strategy on everything.
Yes, exactly. That's his negotiating strategy.
And then you negotiate. So there have been over 50 of the 100 countries that have tariffs imposed on them that have already approached the United States, including Israel, saying, all right, how can we work this out? We'll wipe out our tariffs, including the EU and Taiwan and Vietnam, big trading partners of the United States. And they haven't turned around and said, okay, fine, we'll make the deal. We'll wipe out the tariffs. We saw that with Netanyahu in the White House yesterday, the day before we're recording this at least. And I think most Israelis thought that it was going to be just that easy, that Bibi would say, okay, we're going to get rid of all our tariffs and taxes and trade barriers, waiting for Trump to say, okay, we'll get rid of ours. It's not going to be that quick. There's going to be a process for all of the nations of the world because everybody's looking at how these are being negotiated. Once there is stability, this is the bet. The markets will stabilize. They'll spur more economic opportunities. People will open more factories, not just in the U.S., but in different countries where it's 10% and not 17 or 30 or more percent, right? Where the numbers still work. And there'll be a reordering of the economic order.
I'm not sure Bibi offered to get rid of the tariffs. I mean, I'm not sure what he offered. I wasn't there. But it would be interesting to see. And I agree that Trump, that's his negotiating strategy. Sits down on the table, puts a gun on the table, and then the rest, happens. Why is this underlying policy about boxing China out? Tell us a little bit about the whole China dynamic in all of this and what they've been doing over the last few decades.
Yeah, so first of all, I urge everybody to read this book, including you if you haven't seen it. It's called The 100-Year Marathon.
Okay.
The book that came out about 2 years ago, I believe, and it goes through China's policy for economic dominance in the world. And part of what they're trying to do is they're stockpiling the most critical minerals and grains all over the world. They're subsidizing lots of different industries that it's not just economically viable or positive for the country, for China, but it's puts them in a position of power to hold the critical elements that people in the world need, that other countries in the world will need.
So holding us all by the neck, you're saying?
Correct.
And being what? The best supplier, the cheapest supplier?
Yes.
The sole supplier even?
Yeah, they undercut everywhere. By the way, here in Israel, just this week, a Chinese government-owned, CCP-owned company just expanded their lease in the Haifa port. That's something in the U.S. we're pushing back against a lot. Yeah. But why? You have to ask, why are they spending so much money on critical infrastructure and ports all over the world and transportation hubs all over the world? And it has to do with this plan. It's not a conspiracy. They're open about it, of what they're trying to do. They're trying to assert economic dominance. If you think of Panama for a second, if we just jump around, there's so much happening in the world.
Oh my God.
Politics right now. Trump came in and said, well, we're going to take over the Panama Canal.
Yes.
Within a month, we all learned that Chinese government, CCP, controlled companies owned both ends of the port, or leases, long-term leases on both ends of the Panama Canal.
Really?
Of the canal, I'm sorry. So all this was, and Hested is there now, but is a way to get those companies out and make sure American interests will always be protected. So you can't have two Chinese companies controlling both ends of the Panama Canal, which can close off trade any day of the week. If there's any sort of war or even a trade war with China, they could say, okay, we'll shut down the port, and the U.S. can't do anything. So now they're shepherding in a deal, which hasn't been finalized yet, to get an American-owned company to take over those leases, so that way the Chinese are not controlling the Panama Canal. So that's what's happening all over the world. Is it a risky game? People are up in arms. Yes, it's a risky game. It's absolutely a game of high stakes poker with all of our lives and all the world's economy. It doesn't get bigger than this. And anybody who could tell you what's going to happen as a result is lying to you, because nobody knows, right? The markets have to react in a certain way. The political markets, let's call them markets, have to react in a certain way. But I truly believe in the power of the American economy and American politics, and I think countries will line up. Everybody wants to do business with America. And once they realign, there might be a dip, but I think it'll be for the best for the American economy.
So just run through the best case and worst case scenario that could happen from all of this.
So the best case scenario is, let's start with China. They'll actually come to the table. The trade war will end. We'll have some sort of deal with China.
At the moment, they've imposed incredible tariffs on China.
I think it's over 100% now tariffs, the U.S. against China and China against the U.S.
Right.
It's no one wants to use the word trade war, but
it is.
There's nothing else to call it.
Yeah, of course.
So there's definitely a trade war happening. It's been quick. The U.S. keeps trying to get them to come to the table because that's the strategy. They haven't so far because there's lots of egos to go around.
Mm-hmm.
But the best case scenario is starting with China because that's the biggest player. There will be a new trade deal, call it whatever you want.
A more reciprocal trade deal.
More reciprocal, that's more friendly for American companies selling to China because they really don't at all. They're not allowed.
And their market is enormous.
And their market is enormous, exactly. And then we can have sort of a more fair trade deal that can be great for both economies. But also, I think there's other countries that are lining up very quickly, like Japan and Vietnam, for example, Taiwan, that are really trying to improve their relationships with the United States economically. Their enemies isn't the word, but they really have tough relationships, let's say, with China.
With China, of course.
So if they can increase their relationship with the United States, it weakens China economically, which is really the way that they try to go after the world. So those are things that can be reordered. If you look south to South America, we talk about Milei here in Israel a lot because he loves Israel and the Jewish community. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The U.S. has had a blind spot south of its border when it comes to Hezbollah training camps, Iran, but also economically, right? Like there's big viable industries in Latin America that can be tapped to support the U.S. economy.
They're very resource rich.
They've not done that. But you know who has been active in South America?
China.
Yeah. So lots of good things can happen out of this if the right moves are in place. The best confidence that I have is if you look at the team that Trump has put into place for all of this, it's all A+ people. So, I have a lot of trust in the team, everyone from Secretary Rubio to Howard Lutnick. These guys, they know what they're doing, and we'll see if they can make it happen.
Well, it's interesting because people just think that Trump is constantly shooting from the hip. They think he has no plan, he's a madman, and he just throws things on the table. And I actually think that there's a lot of strategy. That's just his style. But there's actually real policy behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. The shoot from the hip thing is just a talking point.
Yeah.
These are his plans that he's trying to implement. And anyone around the administration will tell you that this time around, it's different because he knows how to get things done. He's learned how to pull the levers of government. The first time around, he had never been in government before. You get into the White House. Most people, when they get to the White House, are almost frozen. They don't know how to move. That the bureaucracy sticks them.
The deep state
has a deep state.
Yeah,
you're stuck behind the Resolute desk and you can't do anything. This time, Trump is getting things done from day one. I think we saw that even with Israel and the hostage deal on day one that they pushed through. No one really liked the deal that was on the table, but that was the only deal on the table. He wanted to get things moving, and he was able to get it done. And that's because he already understands how to move government.
Which is huge, as you and I know.
Yeah. And
just understanding how.
4 years to wait and say, here's what I want to get done.
Exactly. And so you think that it could be amazing in terms of South America. It's funny you say that because I was just in Brazil for an economic conference, and one of the top economists of the country spoke, and he said that actually the trade war with China could be very good for Brazil.
Exactly. I mean, depends who the president is in Brazil.
Of course. Not the current one, but in terms of Brazil's economy, which is also very resource rich, it could be great to do more trade with America.
Even Mexico. And the president of Mexico is by the way, not a fan of the Jews.
Terrible woman.
Not a fan of Israel.
No.
Scheinbaum, despite her somewhat Jewish background.
Yes.
Does everything to
compensate.
Compensate the other direction. But Mexico is a big trading partner of the United States, and even she is being very careful with her dealings with Trump because the economic impact for all this could be amazing for Mexico. It actually could be good for Canada too.
Yeah.
If you look to the north, they have an election coming. Trump has been trying to put his finger on the scale there a little bit for Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
For all the Canadians listening, I know I say his name wrong. I can't figure it out. I'm not
Canadian. I think you're Poilievre.
Poilievre.
You can do the Spanish side.
I interviewed Stephen Harper and the former prime minister. We had a great interview.
He's great.
Great discussion. And it went pretty viral in Canada. But most of the comments were just criticizing the way I'm saying Pierre's last name. So I'm just going to say Pierre, the leader of the Conservative Party. Pierre. And he's up by about 25 points in the polls. So when he comes in, there's going to be a big boom, I think, with the United States and Canada as well. So lots of things can fall into place. Is it a high-risk game? Absolutely.
Well, okay, so that's wonderful for you breaking it down because, like I said, I've heard so many doomsday scenarios from so many people who I consider smart. You have Bill Ackman writing to Trump saying this is a disaster, I'm assuming because of the markets. He's a big fund manager. So we just hope that, and I think what's really interesting is that the little man, like you say, the regular manufacturer, the employee, is very supportive of this.
The labor unions.
The labor union is supportive. These are the people who were traditionally Democrats.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this inverse anti-globalism that really messed with the working class. And now the Republican Party are standing for it. It's really actually quite amazing the way things have flipped in that sense. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, the Republican Party today is the party of the working man.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party is the party of the elites
Of
on
the
the
elite.
coast. And, that's when you talk to Democratic strategists or members of Congress that are intellectually honest and maybe just privately, they'll talk to you all the time about this. Like the fact that the Democrats have lost that working man support is really tough for them because, the country is not New York, Miami, and LA.
Exactly.
Right? That's a small minority of the
It's
country.
a bubble.
You have to really be able to speak to Main Street all over the country. Now, look, I want to tell you that I always look at the world through rose-colored glasses.
Me too.
I'm an optimist. So the smart people who say this is terrible and lots of bad things are going to happen, maybe they're right. I hope they're wrong. I have trust in the process, and I can see things are already lining up. And it's more about long-term. So we'll hit the market short-term. I'm just not looking at my accounts.
No, I think that this is what I've been telling everyone. Just, the markets are always a long game. And so just because something dips, it doesn't mean that, you're not going to take it out now. So leave it in and hopefully it'll go up and it'll make some amazing changes. Yes. So just shifting a little bit to just regular politics in terms of the United States, how are Congress reacting to all of this? Because there are some Republicans who are up in arms because they think it's going to prove negative for them in the midterms. What do you think about all of that?
So right now in Congress, the party is pretty united,
yeah,
which is pretty incredible. Even with all these big moves happening all over the world, it's not just on the economy, but Trump is every move he's making right now is a big move. The Republicans had a special election last week. Not just the Republicans, but Republicans won in 2 special elections last week in Congress. Both of them were in Florida, performed really well. The left-wing press was trying to make it negative.
Saw that. I was there, and CNN, he just made it through.
He won by 15 points, I believe. Trump won by 30. Okay, but Trump is Trump.
Okay, exactly.
The election is no one shows up at these special elections. So they did well. The party's unified. Everybody is anxious to deliver on the agenda that Trump won on before this midterm election, which is in a year and a half. Things move quickly. So, in fact, what they're trying to do is move the ball forward as much as possible. It's difficult. I mean, they couldn't even get a budget passed now. They just did another continuing resolution.
But doesn't he have the House and the Senate?
He does, but the majority is very slim.
Right.
So these different factions. We're here in Israel. You have all the different parties. We only have 2 parties in the U.S.
Yeah.
But within the party, there's lots of different factions that negotiate together on certain things. There are some similarities there. So on the budget, which is the most important thing, they did now another continuing resolution, which is kicking the ball down the road with budget cuts, which were problematic because they were across the board cuts to just try to reach the goals that they're trying to reach economically. But it's tough to see they cut some stuff that they definitely should not have cut. Now they're all trying to work back to go see if they can re-implement some of these programs. I'm working on some of those issues also. But in general, right now, the Republican Party is very unified. There's a lot of energy behind them, behind all the races all over the country. Everyone's excited to see the midterms. People are not yet talking about the next presidential election, but we're only about a year and a half away from those discussions starting. So everything's around the corner. Right now, it's about delivering results.
Well, I think that's the energy of the first 100 days or first 200 days now coming close to is really incredible how much has been done. So Bibi was in the White House this week, Prime Minister Netanyahu. He went for the trade stuff, but he also went to talk about Iran. And I'm not sure whether he expected it, but, Trump, who likes to riff, says in the middle of the press conference, we're having direct talks with Iran. How has that been received? And what do you think about that?
So I think it's interesting. So first of all, my friends here in Israel kept thinking that Bibi was going to the White House to speak about the tariffs. I immediately, when I saw this, it's not based on any inside information. Like, Bibi doesn't have to fly to the White House to deal with the tariffs.
Exactly.
There's economic ministers. There's a great ambassador in Washington that Israel has. Like it's not a tough negotiation. Israel's going to say, here, what do you want? And they're going to get it.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a big negotiation there.
Yeah.
It had to have been about Iran and maybe pending strikes on Iran. I think the economic markets and how things have gone down, I think probably have impacted the timing if something was being done in Iran or was to be done in Iran. Because if Israel or the U.S. hits Iran, it's also going to impact the markets in the world, right? So that's something that they're looking at. But there's a lot being spoken about whether it's direct or indirect talks, right? Iran is saying we're not having direct talks.
Yes.
Indirect.
They talk about Oman in 2 different rooms.
Yes, it's all nonsense, right? And we know everybody's speaking, whether you're speaking through an intermediary or not. What's the difference?
You're still speaking.
Yes, you're still speaking. I don't have a problem with it at all. I mean, I think the interests of the United States and Israel are entirely aligned when it comes to Iran. Israel has not had a partner like we have now, or like they have now in the United States with Trump and the entire administration.
Yeah.
But no one wants to go to war with Iran.
Absolutely not.
Right? There needs to be, we want to dismantle their nuclear programs, get rid of their weapons. Right? It's not hard. Implementing it is hard, but understanding what wants to get done is not so difficult. What we want to get done, we both countries want to get done. Trump is known, he's going to put out the threats, but the difference with Trump and let's say Biden is that his threats actually mean something.
Yeah.
So he's telling Iran, this is it. It's time to either get rid of the programs, let's make a deal. It's not going to be the JCPOA, right? It's not going to be the Obama-Iran deal. It's going to be get rid of your weapons. And if they don't, there's going to be an attack.
And exactly. And what is very Trump-like about what he's doing is that the gun in the table is already here.
Right.
He's managed to ship all of the, I guess, military weaponry we need, or we would need, or they would need with us to actually do it.
Yeah, about a quarter of the U.S. Navy is in this area right now.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean, with all the bombers that are necessary to take out Iran.
Exactly.
And look, Biden did something similar in the beginning of the war.
He did.
Where he brought over the ships, or the carriers. But then his threats that he made to Hezbollah, remember, he said, don't get involved.
Well, and the Houthis,
the next day.
And the Houthis started attacking and nothing was done.
They've done nothing. At most, they responded to rocket launchers. That was about it. But the U.S., it's obviously now, with Trump, it's a totally different game. Iran understands it.
I think so.
The question is, what's Iran going to do? Because the last couple times that this has come to a head, they've been able to get away with murder, right?
They also attacked us twice.
Right.
In the last year, without creating a regional war, which in any other circumstance would have happened.
Yep.
Those 2 attacks.
Well, and Israel retaliated properly, probably not strong enough, if you ask me. But Iran didn't do anything.
No. I mean, I know. It's crazy to think that this time last year, right, a few days before Pesach, we were attacked by Iran directly with 300 missiles, and the U.S. helped prevent a regional war along with Saudi Arabian partnerships and the UAE and other countries. It's just incredible that the year and a half that we've lived, and now this kind of complete flip policy of this administration. So, Gabe, I know you said you're an optimist. I'm also an optimist. So I'd like to hear from you, just, your little prediction for the next year.
I mean, well, first let's talk about Israel because we're here in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I'm confident that this war is going to end up being successful. I still pray that we get the hostages out. Last week in Shabbat in my house, I was lucky enough to host Keith and Aviva Siegel, or Your Horn, and we've hosted so many of the hostages as they come out when they come through the U.S., which is sort of the new thing that everybody's doing, and coming to South Florida. We come close to many of the families. Like one of them said, we need a miracle bigger than the splitting of Yam Suf to get them all out of the Red Sea, but we all believe in miracles, and we're seeing the miracles happening every single day in the darkness. So I have to be optimistic that somehow we'll get out at least the hostages that are alive now. It's 24, 25 of them that are alive. I believe at the end of this war, whether it happens in this next year or not, Israel's going to shepherd in several decades of unparalleled economic and military strength. If you just take it's hard to do it because we're still in the middle of the war, but if you take a step back and see that Israel's enemies are being decimated.
They are.
And their stockpiles are decimated. They're politically decimated. Their leaderships have been decimated. Their peoples have been really just hurt as well as a result of these wars, which means they're going to have to go into a stage of rebuilding. It doesn't mean they're suddenly going to be lovers of the West and of Israel. They're not, right? But they're going to have to be licking their wounds for several decades, which will give Israel the opportunity to continue to grow. I mean, just look at some indicators, Fleur. If you look at the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange market.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the TA35 or whatever, I think went up over 30% last year.
It's almost 30% in the middle of the war, outdoing China, US, Japan, all other markets.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So the economy here is flourishing.
It's booming.
Yesterday there was an article here. I was reading the local newspaper in Israel that I think 70% of people in Israel have credit card debt. And I'm like, I asked a friend.
They always did.
They
always did.
Not a news story.
That's how we live.
Yes, they were trying to tie it to what's happening now, but all other indicators, the economy is doing well.
Yes.
Now, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? It means that people are ready to get back to work because they already are getting back to work.
Yes.
And it's not just the whizzes of the world that are selling for over $30 billion, but small companies, mom and pop shops. Once tourism comes back to this country,
yes,
right, and we're seeing also different industries like the defense industry has had a showcase for the last 2 years.
You're right. It's gone up in terms of investment 500%.
Wow.
5 out of the 10 top cyber companies in the world are in Israel.
Wow.
And so the economy looks great from our perspective if we can get over this hump with the trade.
But if you look at, to tie it to the discussion we were talking about, the trade wars, let's say the tariffs and trade issues with the United States all over the world, Israel's going to have the exact same thing. So if you look at Israel from a political or security perspective, one of the big faults that Israel's strategy has shown from this war is relying upon other countries to ship them weapons.
Yeah.
And Israel has a great industry in that sense.
Yeah.
But they were just exporting to other countries like India and Italy and other countries. But then for their own defense, Israel's own defense, we're getting it from the United States. Israel needs to onshore, which is the term that we use, to onshore all that manufacturing.
I think they're starting.
Yeah, and they have to renegotiate their deal with the United States, maybe get less money from the U.S., but be able to spend more of it here in Israel for the Israeli economy, because right now it's all spent in the U.S.
Yes.
I'm sure your listeners know.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's great for the U.S. economy. It's good for Israel.
Yeah.
Until you have a president who doesn't want to send you the arms that you're purchasing. So
we can't take that risk.
When Trump started, he shipped all these weapons to Israel, and the press asked him,
yes,
why'd you ship this to Israel? He's like, they bought it. It was already paid for.
Exactly.
But whoever's holding that has the power. So Israel needs to onshore that, which I think is also going to be an economic boom for the country.
That's a really good way of looking at it, and I think you're correct. And the Israeli economy is surprisingly, miraculously maybe, booming much more than anywhere else. And so we hope that all of this kind of growing pains, let's call it that, actually leads to, like you say, and like you're optimistic about, and I want to share in your optimism, a few decades of peace and prosperity for the region and for the world. Gabe Groisman, thank you for the incredible work that you do, talking about Israel in America, standing for Israel, shepherding great causes, receiving hostages, you and your wife. Do an incredible amount of work for Israel and the Jewish people. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for not making me your scumbag of the week.
Oh, never, never. Hero. Thank you all.